Evil can only thrive when good people do nothing. And that's what had been happening in Uganda. Witch doctors would kidnap babies and little children. They would sacrifice them, mutilate their genitals, and use them for their witch doctor ceremonies. Everyone knew that this happened in Uganda, but no one, not the police, not the judicial system, not the parents, wanted to confront a witch doctor. That's how much power they had in this country. And this evil practice carried on way until modern day. One of the reasons why no one would ever prosecute a witch doctor was because there were no survivors. And under Ugandan law, for that to take place, they needed to have some type of proof and some type of live witness. And this just never happened. Well, one day, an 8-year-old named Charlie was walking through the bush. A witch doctor jumped out from behind a tree, grabbed him, dragged him into the bushes, and mutilated him. Now, Charlie should have died from loss of blood, but miraculously, he was able to drag himself to safety, and he was rescued. Well, there is an American lawyer who wrote several books named Bob Goff, who was friends with many of the judges in Uganda. And he knew that this had been a problem, and he wanted to do something about it. Like, how do you stop child sacrifice in a modern country? How do you stop witch doctors in 2000s? This is crazy. And so when he heard about Charlie, he immediately flew all the way over to Uganda. And when he got there, the witch doctor had been arrested, but no judge would take the case. In a country of 40 million people, there wasn't a judge who was willing to risk taking on the witch doctors. That's how much power these guys had. That's how powerful the darkness was in Uganda. Well, Bob Goff was finally able to find a judge who said, okay, I'll take the case. This has got to stop. And when word got out that this judge was taking the case and that the witch doctor would actually see trial, strange, crazy things started happening around the judge's home. The witch doctors would show up and do unspeakable, evil, dark things. And it got to the point where the judge had armed guards with machine guns all around his house. His life and the life of his family was in danger because he was willing to stand up to the darkness. Well, the trial day came, and the judge allowed for Bob Goff and his prosecuting team to bring in a video camera so that the trial could be recorded and shared with the nation. Because everyone in the nation wanted this to stop, but everyone was terrified of the witch doctors. And the judge said, no, this is going out for everyone to see. Well, one point during the trial, one of Bob Goff's guys was filming, and he was filming the witch doctor. And the witch doctor looked straight into the camera, and the camera actually went to fuzz. It broke. And the guy holding the camera, just his face turned pale white, and he started to tremble. I mean, this isn't just like crazy hick superstition stuff. Like, there was evil in the room. People could feel the darkness. And then the next day came where the little kid had to come into the room and testify. Here's an 8-year-old boy named Charlie who has literally lost his manhood, who is in the room with the person who did it. And this person is powerfully dark. And everything in that little kid wanted to say, wasn't him, I don't know, go back to normal, because he knew the threats, he knew the risk. But somehow, this little kid found the courage to say, that was the man who did this thing to me. When the case was finally finished, the judge pronounced the very first guilty verdict on a witch doctor in the modern nation of Uganda, and set a huge precedent and a huge warning to the witch doctor community saying this kind of darkness is no longer acceptable in my country. Man, what are you afraid of? I mean, I'm afraid of a lot of stuff, but nothing that dark or scary. You see, the Bible 365 different times says, do not be afraid. Because as Christians, we have a God who stands behind us, who is stronger than any witch doctor's darkness, who is stronger than any virus or economic meltdown or bad politician. This God is so strong and powerful. He says, don't be afraid. I will fight for you. Just be still. This God can part the Red Seas. He can make walls fall down. He can raise the dead. He casts out demons. And he turns to us and he says, don't be afraid. He says, when you see evil, when you see little children being hurt, when you see people being taken advantage of, don't be afraid and do nothing. If you study the history of how Nazism was able to take over Germany and how communism took over Russia and how societies go from being pretty normal, free societies to totalitarian states, if you see how this happens, it is not because a leader forced the country to follow them. It's because when that leader started to get power, good people did nothing. And when they could have spoken up, when they could have acted out, when they could have stopped him, they stayed safe. And then that leader got so much power, finally he was unstoppable. I don't know what's going on in our society today, but I do know that you will face evil very soon. And when that evil steps in front of you, whether it is a church member gossiping or a witch doctor hurting a child, you must stand up. You got to be like that judge and say, I don't care what kind of threats are here. I don't care what's going to happen to me. I'm going to do the right thing. You got to be like Charlie, that 8-year-old kid whose life will never be normal. Say, I'm going to do the right thing. I don't care how scared I am. You see, a lot of people think being courageous is not having any fear. That's not true. True courage comes from acting through the fear. You see, you cannot be courageous without having faith. And that's why Jesus came and he lived and he died on the cross and he rose again and he gave us tons of promises, because he says, no matter what happens to you, whether you are super successful and you win the day like in Uganda, or whether you are burned at the stake like the martyrs from the Reformation, everything turns out okay in the end. So trust me and be strong and be courageous. And you stand up against evil, because he calls us the light. And we are not to allow darkness to overcome while we're around. This story about Charlie came from Bob Goff's book, Everybody Always. He also wrote Love Does. They're both phenomenal books. Encourage you to pick them up and read it. But whatever you do today, remember, God is good. He's got your back. And he needs you to be the light. God bless.